the conqueror of the Old Northwest, the Washington of the West, the founder of Louisville, General George Rogers Clark. Hey everybody, this is Russ Carson Jr., and I'm at the Falls of the Ohio State Park, outside of Clarksville, Indiana, along the Ohio River, just across the river from Louisville. I'm at the location that General George Rogers Clark lived from 1803 until 1809. It's also known as his retirement home. Who's General George Rogers Clark? Well, during the American Revolution, the British encouraged Native American allies to raid the frontier settlements in Kentucky. Because of the war in the East, the colonial army did not have any troops to spare to send out west to defend the settlements. So George Rogers Clark convinced Virginia Governor Patriot to sponsor raids against the Native Americans north of the Ohio River. In 1778, Clark set up an outpost on Corn Island in the Falls of the Ohio. This would be the meeting point and staging ground for his raids into the north. This settlement eventually became Louisville, Kentucky. That's right, Louisville. That's how we say it in Kentucky. You may pronounce it as Louisville or Louisville, but we call it Louisville. With 179 men, George Rogers Clark stepped off against the Native American settlements, and he was very successful, sacking 3 British outposts to include Kaskaskia, Cahokia, and Fort Sackville in Vincennes. They even captured the British Lieutenant Governor, Henry Hamilton, also known as the Hair Buyer. In 1780 and 1782, Native Americans began more attacks on settlements into Kentucky. This time, George Rogers Clark led retaliation attacks into the Ohio country. His raid in 1782 was the last major expedition of the Revolutionary War, and his success led to the United States winning a huge territory from the British, the Northwest Territory. Even after the end of the Revolutionary War, Native American bands continued to attack settlements in the Kentucky Territory. This time, General George Rogers Clark led a force of 1,200 men against Native Americans along the Wabash River. This was a horrible expedition. The conditions were terrible. The men almost mutinied, and George Rogers Clark was accused of being drunk on duty. This accusation forever tarnished his image. Later, he almost became a general for France to lead attacks against the Spanish in the Louisiana Territory. Due to his debts, he lost almost all of his land before retiring here at Clark's Point. The area has an awesome view of the Falls of the Ohio and the Ohio River. Some of the well-known visitors to this home site was Aaron Burr, John James Audubon, and many Native American chiefs. General George Rogers Clark lived here until 1809, until he suffered a stroke and fell into his fire. He was badly burned and his right leg had to be amputated, and he also suffered from partial paralysis. He was forced to live out the rest of his days with his sister at her plantation Locust Grove outside of Louisville. The original cabin that Clark built was destroyed in 1854. But in 2001, this cabin here was moved from Osgood, Indiana. The cabin sits on the Falls of the Ohio State Park, which is about 7 acres. The building behind the cabin is called the McGee Cabin. It is modeled after slave cabins of the time period and would have been the homes of Clark's servants Ben and Venus McGee. Ben and Venus lived in an area near here called Guinea Bottoms, which is one of the first freed slave communities of the Northwest Territory. Also, it was here in 1803 that George Rogers Clark's brother William Clark received a letter from Meriwether Lewis asking him to take part in an epic journey and adventure. Lewis had been hired by President Thomas Jefferson to lead an expedition into the newly acquired Louisiana Purchase and explore the land all the way to the Pacific Ocean. Meriwether Lewis asked his friend William Clark to co-lead the adventure. And it was here that William Clark set up a base camp and recruited some men from Louisville. Those men became the 9 young men from Kentucky, the original group of the Corps of Discovery. It was here at the home of General George Rogers Clark where Meriwether Lewis met up with his friend William Clark and his men, and on October the 26th, 1803, they headed off on their adventure. So here we are at the retirement home of General George Rogers Clark, an American hero and a conqueror of the Old Northwest. And remember, family tree nuts. Let our nuts find the nuts in your family tree. Like what you see? Make sure you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to click the little bell so you get notifications as to when we post new videos. And you can find out more about us and contact us at familytreenuts.org.